Hello, everyone. This is Shannan Vance-Ocampo, and I am the General Presbyter of the Presbytery of Southern New England. My pronouns are she and her. And this is Connecting Our Conversations, our podcast space for conversations that push the edges of our faith and help us to deepen discipleship. The Presbytery of Southern New England is a regional governing body in the Presbyterian Church, USA. And today for our podcast, I will be talking to Jessica Jones, Mark Montgomery, and Chris Tate, who serve as the co-pastors at Wilton Presbyterian Church in Wilton, Connecticut. And I thought it would be fun to have them on the podcast so we could get to know a little bit more about them and about this innovative and very Trinitarian pastoral model of leadership. So welcome, Jessica, Mark, and Chris to Connecting Our Conversations. So welcome to all of you. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Sure. So I thought we'd just get started with introductions, something simple to get started. So whoever wants to go first, tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you do, and especially who you are when you're not engaged in the practice of ministry. Whoever wants to get us going.
I'll get you going, Shannan.
Okay.
I am definitely a pastor. I try really, really hard. My name is Chris Tate. I am one of our Trinity or whatever at Wilton Presbyterian Church. My primary responsibilities at the church, in addition to sharing the leadership roles and preaching with Mark and with Jess, is to focus on how we can implement technology in worship and beyond. And also I help out with stewardship and also what we call it WPC, Wilton Presbyterian Church, Faith in Action. So sort of our mission, our outreach kind of stuff. That's sort of my primary areas of responsibility. I am a drama major by training. So I love doing creative, exploratory stuff, and I have found some great partners in this work in Jessica and in Mark. And I have a couple of sons who are driving me nuts in their teenage years, and I happen to be married. My pronouns are he, his, but I'm a cisgender white male. Sorry, everybody, for whom that is triggering, but that's me. And yeah, that's who I am.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Jessica, Mark.
Yeah, I'll go next. I'm Jessica. A little bit about me. I have also 2 children. They are quite a bit younger than Chris's, 5 and 8. So we're in a different phase of, still wanting to. Well, I shouldn't say that Chris's children don't want to be with him. I was going to say they're still wanting to be with me. Starting off strong, but pretty needy. So we spend a lot of time outside. We're kind of a camping, hiking crew. So that's what makes us happy, is being outside. Let's see, a little bit about me. Before I came here, I was a hospital chaplain focusing on palliative care, and now do some of that, not as much, and was ordained fairly recently in 2020. Was a high school teacher for a bunch of years before that. And my areas of focus in our church leadership are pastoral care, so it works well with my hospital background, spiritual formation, and the deacons. So that's where I'm focusing.
Great. Last but not least, Mark.
And Mark, let's see, I'm a cradle Presbyterian, but ordained in the United Church of Christ. The time I was going through my ordination process, the PCUSA had not quite caught up with who I was and who I was called to be. And so now that we are in tandem with that call, I am welcomed into the PCUSA, which I'm grateful. But even while I was not ordained in the Presbyterian Church, have continued to work with Triennium and the National Church with Montgomery Conference Center, and have remained connected on various boards and committees, even as a UCC pastor through the years. And so when I was called to be a part of Wilton Presbyterian after having been an interim at First Presbyterian Greenwich, it's all felt very familiar and a bit like a homecoming of sorts, which has been quite exciting. And it's kind of funny to refer to the Frozen Chosen as exciting, but it has. I love the Presbyterian tradition. I love the UCC tradition too, but I've always resonated a bit more with the polity of the Presbyterian Church, and have operated in that even within my UCC settings, which has been interesting. So nonetheless, to be back in this space has been really fulfilling. I identify using pronouns he, him, and my partner and I live in Norwalk, and my mother-in-law lives with us. We have 2 dogs, and our lives are oftentimes more full than we can even handle. So we enjoy the fullness and sometimes enjoy the emptiness when it sneaks up on us, which is good too. Yeah, so that's us.
Great. So let's just talk a little bit about this 3-pastor model. So the 3 of you serve, each of you is a third, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, of a full-time call. So together you make a full-time package in terms of the finances of a pastor, but you each do different pieces of that, or full-time and a little bit more maybe.
Yeah.
And but you all do different pieces, but the idea is that rather than having a full-time pastor who does everything, you have 3 people that make up bring lots of different gifts to the table. And so talk to me about that and what it's like doing ministry in community with each other and bringing different gifts, and how it's been walking that process through. This is the first time this congregation has done this in recent memory. And so, what's it been like, and how does it work, all of you working together?
The first thing I'll say is that I am fresh off of a vacation. And so in a very practical way, I am so thankful, right, for these 2 that I was able to go away from my home, right, and my work for a whole week. And the church thrived while I was gone. And I really felt good about disconnecting completely, putting on my message, call Chris and Mark for any pastoral needs. And I mentioned I was my focus was pastoral care, but the way we've set it up is that I'm the coordinator. So I delegate to these 2. And anyway, I think that is, in terms of this being a model that can endure, the time away, and using each other, taking turns with things, giving each other breaks when needed. So far, we're only 8 months in, something like that. But that's something fresh in my mind. Just a couple days back, is I was really able to disengage.
Yeah, and to kind of tag on to that, I mean, the wonderful thing is, having served in solo and multi-staff roles, just to differentiate a little bit, this is a co-pastor model. So all of us are compensated equitably. We spend the same amount of time. It was really important for us when we were coming into this is to model a leadership model that was less hierarchical, just to try, not only because we had a desire to do that, but because the church seemed to need that, in my opinion. The church needed to understand that that there were multiple answers, there are multiple voices, and so to engage those voices equitably in leadership was really important for us, and so that's been good. So to Jess's point, if one of us needs to walk out the door because our schedules change, there are 2 people that are equal standing and equal respect, et cetera, within the congregation, who can quickly pick that up without, a lot of planning, if you will. We still plan and we still love to plan, but it's nice to be able to say, I've got to take my dog to the vet today. Can you all cover this? And it's just simple things like that, which are so completely liberating in this model, because it allows us to have personal lives as well as professional lives. And not that we need to always separate those things, because, Jess's and Chris's families come to church, etc. But it's good to be able to acknowledge when we just need to focus on our personal lives too.
The big things that jump out for me, Shannan, are communication and trust. I mean, foundational to this working in any way, and I'm speaking for myself here, I assume it's similar things are true for Jess and for Mark, is that I trust these two very much. And that is kind of the bedrock, the core, that has to be there for this to work, that we trust one another's judgment. We trust one another's, to say when they need something, or when I need something, when they need something. We trust one another to, pick up slack when a ball gets dropped. That is a core thing. And then the second part, communication. We do a lot of communicating, a lot, because you kind of have to, right? But I think that that's both a positive thing and in some ways a negative thing. But I think on balance, it's positive all the time, because even when we communicate badly, I think communicating badly is better than not communicating at all. And the one thing that this model forces us to do is always be talking to one another. And I'm not saying that we always get it right, but it's so much better to at least talk about something and get it wrong, because then we can fix it later. Because I think one of the worst things in any multi-staff model of any kind is when you have staff members who don't talk to each other, either because of hierarchy, as Mark alluded to before, or whatever else. But one thing that this model, inherent in it, is this need, for it to even get off the ground, we have to constantly be reaching out to one another and double checking and sending ideas and everything. And I think I appreciate the way that this model engenders that joining together, because again, that communication reinforces that trust. And it just keeps going in a wonderful kind of cycle. So I hate the word wonderful. I used it anyway.
I remember, Chris, when we were the first time the three of us met after beginning on July 17th, you said, one important thing to me is that we hold the time for the three of us sacred each week. And so in addition to the entire staff meeting, our youth person, right, the musician, the three of us meet in addition to that. And it is more time in a week that is meant to be 15 to 20 hours total for each of us. But it really does save time, and it builds camaraderie and trust. And so even if we're not, meeting for an extended time, we always will check in.
Yeah, so we have that communication formalized, as well as just a part of what we do. There is as Jess said, like a regular check-in every week, whether we feel like we need to or not. And if we're not going to, then we communicate that we're not going to.
Yeah. And how has it been for the congregation? How have they reacted to the shared leadership? What do you think their kind of growing pains and growing joys have been with all of this? How's it been on the congregational side?
Yeah, so it was interesting. Before Jess and Chris were at the church, I was the full-time person. And just recognizing that we need to begin to look at ministry differently. I mean, having no preconceived notion of what that might be, but this all happened very organically because it happened with having conversations with the congregation, with session, with other committees, etc. You know, what is it that you want to become as a church? And when we started talking about all the caveats of that, about wanting more opportunities for adult education, wanting more opportunities for outreach, etc., and also understanding that the capacity of congregants now in this day and age to do those things themselves, there was a lot of burnout. People had so engaged so deeply for so many years that they just didn't have the capacity. And so a lot of that was potentially going to fall on staff. And so we just began having conversations around what might a staffing model look like and how might we be able to explore these things more fully without draining a pastor. And so that's really where it all started. And from there, we were able to say, all right, here are the areas we would like, here's what we might be able to do. And then just very organically, again, Chris and Jess were available, Jess being a child of the church, Chris being, a local Presbyterian pastor who had been a stay-at-home parent for a while. And then, I was already there. So it was kind of like the perfect storm. And so when it came to the congregation, the anticipation of it was, we want this to happen so badly, we just don't want to mess it up. And there was just there was almost a fearfulness around it, but not around what it might be, but around that it might not happen. And so the anticipation of it was so great that the congregation has just really latched onto it. And the interesting thing, Shannan, is it's felt so natural that it's almost hard to imagine it differently at this point for us, because it's working so well for the congregation, and people, there's not one person who's responsible for answering all the questions. Like, Jess really is so wonderful at pastoral care, and Chris is really wonderful at this tech stuff, and I kind of take on the admin pieces. And so we all get hit with those questions, but then there's just such a joy around it that the congregation feels that it just feels like we are flowing into what was intended to be, versus trying to push something that we created that the congregation isn't ready for.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, when you said what we're intended to be, it reminds me of our founding pastor and how that plays into the readiness of the congregation for this model. We celebrated the life of the founding pastor of the church, which was in 1961. And the model at that time was innovative. So he joined with an Episcopalian priest, to build a campus that we still share. We still share the youth ministry and other programs and space with this different denomination. And so the foundation of the church was ecumenical and thinking outside the box. And so this is thinking outside the box in a different way, but it was, I think, exciting for the three of us and as a church family to remember and hear stories about this person who really did set our path, and kind of think about how delighted he would be to see this model. One of the exciting things that we've started and is something called Wild Goose Sundays. And we thought Stu McCall would be especially excited about these in terms of making worship especially joyful. It's basically a service that we do monthly on the first Sunday of the month, on the Communion Sunday. It's an intergenerational service. And it's kind of beautiful the way God has worked, because it began in a model of, I want to say scarcity, but where we were trying to think creatively about how and where our kids could be in service and church school leadership changing. And now it has grown into, I'd say, the most popular and attendance-wise service of the month. And it's basically things where it's called Wild Goose because Wild Goose is the name in Celtic Christianity for the Holy Spirit. And so it's following the path of the wild goose, which is not always our path. And maybe I'll stop talking and let one of you tell a little bit about some examples or what we've done.
Mark, can you refresh the wild goose image? Because I know you had kind of been a part of introducing that image.
Yeah, so Jess touched on it. This kind of this Celtic spirituality piece, and basically that geese are wild and unpredictable and noisy and messy and all of these things, right? And the Holy Spirit is exactly the same way. So we love to look at the Holy Spirit as a dove, which is very appropriate and biblical, et cetera, et cetera. But when you're following the Holy Spirit, it feels less like a dove and more like a goose. And so I love, yeah, right. I love that kind of imagery. And so we do that in worship, and it's been wild and wonderful. I mean, we're overusing wonderful, as Chris pointed out before, but I think that we all find ourselves in this very wonderful time. So what can we do but keep expressing that? But yeah, the Sundays have been Jessica led a Sunday where we baked bread in church and crushed grapes, and Chris led a Sunday where the water actually parted for the Red Sea and collapsed at the wrong moment, but became exactly the right moment. We had a malfunction in our pulley system, but when it collapsed, everyone thought that's the way it was supposed to be. And so again, per Wild Goose theology and Christology and spirituality, it was exactly right. And then and I've led ones that are with wildly choreographed things using mirrors and crosses and peace signs and any number of things. So the point with all of it is that everybody's in worship, every age. And it's an opportunity for families to worship and be present together. But it's also a hopefulness, which again, this entire triad thing, model is for us, is an opportunity to broaden our understanding of, in the triad, we're trying to broaden our understanding about leadership in the church. But in the Wild Goose Sunday, we're trying to broaden what it means to worship. And it doesn't set up, it's not set against how we usually worship. It's just saying, here's another way. And how does this feel for you? And we have some people that only come on Wild Goose Sunday, and we have some people that skip every Sunday but Wild Goose Sunday, and then some people there all the time. So it's been again, for us, it's kind of like the first experimental thing that we've done. But again, to point out, we find ourselves in this wonderful sweet spot of the life of the church. I also should point out, this church is quite young, as Jess pointed out, and we have founding members who are still active in our congregation, who started, when they were in their 30s and now they're in their 90s or whatever, whatever you do the math. I probably botched that, but nonetheless, to say, sorry, I thought I had my phone turned off. So if that came through, I apologize. But nope. Nonetheless, to say that, when we find ourselves in these places, it's been really fun just to experiment. And so I feel like the Wild Goose Sundays have been a direct, again, a very organic movement from where the start of this triad, but to Jess's point, also just the conception of the church, what they dreamed of being when they became a church. I feel like we're just living into that, all these years later, which is exciting.
Yeah, I've been watching the Wild Goose stuff. I am subscribed to the YouTube channel for the churches in the presbytery that have YouTube channels, and so they come up on my feed, and I've been seeing the Wild Goose, and I was actually wondering if some of you had been to the Wild Goose Festival that happens every year in North Carolina, and if that was kind of seeping into some of this.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, the Wild Goose Festival is it's a Christian gathering that happens every summer in Western North Carolina, and theologians go and church leaders go and pastors and church planters and all sorts of different people. And it is that kind of organic, open space. Some people camp and pitch tents at the event. So you might like it, Jessica. And other people bring their RVs, and other people stay at hotels, nearby
I
and
sent a
drive into.
PSNE delegation to the Wild Goose
Yeah,
Festival.
you should. You definitely should. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean Chris and Mark, you were in my cohort for my D-Min work, and the last podcast we listened to was recorded at the Wild Goose Festival.
Ah.
So
Yeah, and I've been to the
yeah.
Wild Goose back
Yeah.
when Mumford and Sons were there, whatever year
Uh-huh.
that was. And yeah, and it's interesting because I think that festival is based on this same concept.
Yes.
There's actually a book that was written about this, which I shared with Jess and Chris when we were dreaming of this, but I love that it is also reflective of that experience there, because it is the Wild Goose Festival in and of itself is a different way of understanding gathering. I would say more so gathering as people of faith than even worshiping as people of faith. Like, what happens when people who are seeking to understand God and themselves more fully in the intersection of both of those things, what happens when you get together and you sing and you explore, and that's again for us what the not only Wild Goose Sunday, I think it's what we're trying to do just in general in the church is one of the questions we keep asking ourselves, because again, this whole model and Wild Goose and any number of things came as a result of burnout, and I keep reminding myself of that. Right. Is that people were just so tired, and church was becoming a chore. And so we constantly ask ourselves, when you show up, we want you to be joyful. Where is the joy in this? Yeah, there's some tedious things we're going to have to do, and we might have to sit through a meeting that's a bit longer than we thought. But even that, we're changing our meeting schedule so that we're not meeting every month, so that people, if you serve on 3 committees, and that can be 3 to 6 hours that you're giving up with your family or whatever you want to do every month. And so we're looking at meeting schedules. We're looking at administration stuff within the church, so that, we got a lot of volunteers that are helping with things like payroll and budgeting. How do we tighten up those things so that, we'll do them, but we're not going to spend hours upon hours on them. Instead, we're going to spend more time gathering as people of faith and having fun and looking at what God might be doing that we can align with, that would excite the church. And honestly, it is really working. I mean, we this past Sunday, this is not a big church. It's not a tiny church, but we've been averaging around 100 people in worship now, which is twice as many as we were before. And I think people are just really starting to, they show up and they think this is fun and it is interesting and I am joyful. And I also just want to see what happens. But I will just, if I could give any wisdom to any other churches, I really do think, this rethinking committee structures and things like that, beyond just the joyfulness of worship and taking the risk taking the risk in those places, but also just saying to people, we want you to come to church and leave feeling fed and blessed. How can we do that? And we ask that question, and the answers are resounding that we don't want to be in as many meetings, we don't want it to be as tedious, we don't want to feel like we're arguing with each other over finances. How do we move beyond that? And that's been intentional on our part.
And I think it's to piggyback on this, Mark, I think it's a real filling up of the tank. Intentionally, I think we're focusing quite a bit on the worship service and the congregating the congregation. In the years of COVID, people kind of disbanded, stopped coming for potlucks, stopped doing as many things out of necessity. And we've seen a real yearning for people to want to be together, want to celebrate. Let's do those fun things we used to do as a congregation. And so I think the focus on the worship time is really bringing people back. Let's feel that joy again. And now we can look at our mission. Let's look at the things we want to do in this community. What is God calling us to do for these people? But it was almost like we needed to focus first on the refueling of this family and regathering.
And it sounds like it's really that post-COVID piece that every organization is going through is, that's mostly volunteer led, is that, before the pandemic, I think a lot of us were just on autopilot, whether we were paid or unpaid, volunteer or paid, and doing what we did because it's what we either always did or what we felt we were supposed to, or we were obligated to, or and then, post pandemic, the slate got wiped clean on so much of that. And now we're, we're putting our energy and our time only where it is paying dividends, right? Back to us, and in a church setting, spiritually, emotionally, holistically. And so, I even see it in the life of the presbytery where, where is the energy going in our committee and team structure? Almost everyone who's a little bit younger and wants to be on the anti-racism and equity team, but then asking them to serve on a traditional committee, which we still have those, and it's sort of hard to shake those at a presbytery level. It's like those are a little harder to populate, right? But it's where's the energy going and the sense of call, the sense of urgency. And the COM started the year, our committee on commission on ministry. We met with Carol Howard, who just wrote a book on wounded pastors, and it really is about all the things that wound us in ministry, but at its core that leads us to burnout. And how do we engage ministry in a way that doesn't burn us out has been the perennial question. But having community around us, and so many congregations and pastors are in that solo pastor mold, and that is hard to break out of and think of in a different way, especially economically. And so, the healthiness of something a little bit more holistic, is another piece of the puzzle. But we have all sorts of economic disparity issues in the church. These aren't easy things to pull apart, but beginning to offer some new models is what I'm grateful for as I listen to all of you. But I do think, I think that getting people where they are actually going to be fed and where they can be fed spiritually is so super important these days.
Yeah.
Well, Shannon, I think you've really touched upon what I think is a key factor in where we are right now as churches is, we can call it post-pandemic. I mean, I think the pandemic probably just opened our eyes more than anything to things that were already kind of happening, but then it just took it to another level. And it also gave us a chance to rest, whether we wanted to or not, right? I mean, there were things that were more complicated, but we weren't going to the office every day, et cetera. But with that, it just comes back to me too for joy. Is I don't want the metric for me as a successful pastor to be that I'm just sustaining. Right. How am I joyful in ministry is really an important question for me. And as we were again exploring what it might look like, I think that just became again evident that having colleagues, having shared leadership, having all of that also increases our capacity for joy because it creates space that we wouldn't have otherwise. Now it does create other concerns, right? So for us, it just was a perfect storm that we were all at a place in our lives where we could make this happen. It would look very different if you were trying to go out and do a search and call process for 3 pastors that happen to get along together and were willing to work for less money. So we're aware of that too. So we all talk about, what are ways that this becomes sustainable in the future. And I'm really hopeful that, we can begin to look in our own communities for bivocational options for pastors, et cetera. And, and this is also, we have to acknowledge too, that, oftentimes in Black and brown churches, there are already bivocational histories there that we could look at and understand how other cultures have historically, had pastors who do this and we're in a very privileged kind of place to be able to say, in this very white part of the world, and in our congregation, which is diverse and becoming more diverse, but is still stereotypically a very white Presbyterian church, that this model happened organically in ways that it might not be able to happen in other places. So we're really eager to understand how it might look somewhere else.
Yeah. It's helpful. Yeah, because the other piece I hear from a lot of folks that are in bivocational ministry is that that's exhausting too, because
Exactly.
then you're in the hustle culture and trying to make ends meet. And so that, there's the economics and the parity issues in ministry are just really, really at the forefront these days. And for lots of our people and for our congregations, how they want to pay their pastors fairly, I believe, but the how to do that and how to make it all work is a challenge for sure for all of us.
Absolutely. So that's something we're going to be exploring, that I think as a triad for sure, is what does this look like, and what would it look like if, are there regional ministries that we can engage in? Are there, complementary things like, working with, housing and, whatever other community endeavors that might also compensate financially, but as likewise complement the work we're already doing, so that, again, even there can be mutuality like there is in the leadership at this church now.
That's helpful. Well, anything else that any of you want to put on the table before we wrap up? It's been a great conversation, and definitely will be worth checking in another year or so to see how it's going at that point as the work and the ministry deepens. You're laughing, Chris. You're going to make it a year.
Oh, I know. I just, that's a fun thing to think about.
Yeah.
Is, it just makes me chuckle to think about, what we might say. I don't know why I think that's funny, but I just, I do. I just find that, something that tickles me, I guess. So I'm giggling for that reason.
Yeah, fine.
One thing that I wanted to add is that there is a precursor model for this in our own presbytery, which is kind of beautiful for me. 10 years ago, when I was going through divinity school and did my required internship, it was at First Presbyterian Hartford. And so I got to be the intern with Ginny Smantic, Tom Spears, and Martha Highsmith, who were a trio, and watch their different gifts work, and watch Martha take that Wednesday night Bible study, and they shared the preaching, and they each flourished in their own ways, and that congregation was ready at that time for something like that. So it's beautiful to see the way God has worked in my life in showing me that model. And I would have no idea, at that time, what would happen in my life and in the life of this congregation and with my colleagues. So shout out to First Pres Hartford.
Yeah,
absolutely. And they were able to offer, some of the ministers there were able to offer us, here are some pitfalls that we noticed, and here are, some, when I think originally met with COM to talk about the vision for this, and what a couple of folks from there, from that church were on the committee, and it was just a really helpful perspective. So again, we're hopeful that we can offer that to other people too. And we would love to hear what other people are doing as well in other parts of the world, what's working. We just got a call from a church in Texas that's getting ready to share a campus with a Baptist church there, and wanted to know what it's like to share a campus with an Episcopal church. And Jess was talking earlier too about kind of the shoulders of Stu McCall that we're standing on, and his vision for this church. And I learned in this process that when the church started, he had this dream of having an ecumenical campus that would also have Methodists, etc. And a strange and beautiful thing that's happening at our campus is that we are we have Hindus that meet on our campus for celebrations like Diwali, etc. The Muslim community feels safe with us and use our space occasionally for celebrations and worship as well.
Mm.
And so we're recognizing that because of our own capacity to dream a bit, that we're also able to help other people dream, and in that create a hospitality that I think if we were by ourselves, any one of us, we wouldn't have the capacity to respond to that and be and encourage that. And because of this, we're really seeing a broadness in the grace of God that I think we potentially would have missed otherwise. And that's a huge theological statement for me to make, but also a huge theological statement for me to wrestle with, because I wonder, in what ways do we miss God when we are just trying to survive? And so to be in a place instead where we're thriving is really good.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's a great note to end on. And thank you so much, Jessica,
Thank you, Shannan.
Chris, and Mark, for coming on the podcast and sharing about this ministry. I'll put a tag. We'll check in again maybe in about a year, see how things are going and flourishing and growing from that space. And thank you to each of you for your ministry and being a part of the Connecting the Conversations podcast. So have a great day.
Thank you.